In this video we want to talk about conflict situations in employee relations. Conflict situations within the workplace can occur for various reasons. Essentially it just leads to a breakdown in relationship between the employer and the employee. There is bad feeling between both of them, and that's the source of the conflict. They may disagree about various points, which leads to the conflict, leads to the disagreements. And what we're going to do in this video is just look at some of the areas in which they may disagree, some of the more popular areas to account for disagreement, ones which are most written up and most discussed. So we'll look at some of those in the context of this video. But conflict situations tend to be based very simply on employment contracts and look at issues associated with the day-to-day implementation of the employment contract, because sometimes employers perhaps move away from the employment contract, or indeed sometimes the employees may not live up to their part of the employment contract also. But conflict can arise, for example, based on issues associated with salary and with benefits. Sometimes workers feel that they're not being paid enough. On the other hand, the employers may think the workers are being paid too much. Source of conflict. Redundancy, we'll talk about that later. Working conditions and hours of work. We've also got organisation policies. So there are various ways in which conflict can arise, and these are the sort of general headings under which conflict can arise. And we'll look briefly at each of these in the rest of this video, starting with salary and benefits. Conflict can arise if employees' pay is not satisfactory, if they feel that their pay is not enough, so that they demand an increase in pay. Now, the reasons why they may feel their pay is not sufficient can be based in itself on other factors, which we'll talk about in a second. But when employees feel that their pay hasn't kept abreast of prices, for example, they may feel aggrieved, and they will negotiate for higher wages, higher salaries, more remuneration. They'll negotiate to try and get an increase. Clearly the management have not got an interest in paying higher wages or higher salaries. The management will want to try and hold the line and keep the wage bill as small as possible. Here's a very basic conflict between the two sides. Management, the owners of the business, let's say, they set up the business to make a profit. They did not set up the business to create employment or to pay the workers large salaries. They set up the business to make a profit. So it's in their interest to keep the wage bill down. Now obviously some writers over the years have found loopholes and ways around this and have disputed whether what I've just said is accurate or not, and you'll always find situations to the contrary. But in a very simple sense, the employers set up the business to make a profit, not to pay large sums of money to the employees. Now that's a working hypothesis. We might find examples to the contrary. Strikes can also take place if women workers are paid unfairly. So again, based on salaries and benefits, if the management decide to pay female workers less and they're doing the same work, let's say, then that can lead to conflict. Why should a female worker doing the same job as a male worker, why should they be paid less? What's the logic in that? They're doing the same work. So that could be a source of conflict. The Request for an increase in pay, as I said earlier, could be due to external pressures, for example inflation or an increase in interest rates. Say inflation, if prices are rising and people are receiving a fixed salary or a fixed wage, they'll find they're able to buy less and less as time goes by. So they know about inflation, they know that prices are rising, so they demand an increase in pay. Now the management may not be able to give that because the management might find that their product is not selling as well, the market is constricting, they're finding it difficult to market their product. So management may have to try and hold pay increases. And you can see the ingredients are there for a dispute. Redundancy, well, it may cause all sorts of conflict within the organization. People don't want to lose their work. This is what they depend on to pay their bills, to pay for accommodation and food and transport and clothing and so on. So this is what feeds the family, and they don't want to lose that source of income. Organizations may have to lay off workers because of restructuring, necessary restructuring of the business, perhaps in an effort to try and cut costs. Let's say a company in the UK employs some workers, and then because of globalization there's a lot of imported products that are in direct competition with the output of the business. Well, the imported products, the chances are going to be a lot cheaper. Now, the only way the company in the UK can survive is by cutting costs. Of course, the workers don't want to have their wages and salaries cut. So, what is the solution? Perhaps the business will have to close down, which will cause unemployment and would also cause redundancies. Redundancies being the outcome of the closure of the business. So redundancy is a problem. A redundancy procedure must ensure that staff have the option of redeployment or voluntary service if possible. So if a company is trying to make redundancies in a certain area, can they use the same workers elsewhere within the business? Clearly it depends on the size of the business. Large organisations may have that capacity because there'll always be workers leaving and some retiring and so on. So there might be a possibility of redeploying workers to elsewhere within the company. But small businesses may not have that opportunity. It could also be the case that when redundancies, the need for redundancies have been identified by the company, they may seek voluntary redundancies. They may ask workers to retire or to leave. That may solve the problem because it's done voluntarily. So it's a possibility just to ask workers if they want to leave, and if they do want to leave, perhaps give them some cash to compensate, give them some severance pay to compensate. Of course, all legal procedures must be followed to ensure that staff are not discriminated against or dismissed on unfair grounds. When we consider redundancies, the company should not be able to pick who to make redundant, pick it on a basis of discriminatory practices, pick it on the basis of the colour of people's skins, or the religion they practice, or their backgrounds, their educational backgrounds, or whatever. They should be careful not to discriminate. Working conditions. Well, there's always the possibility of conflict over working conditions. People go to work to earn a living. They don't go to work to put their life at risk. They don't want to work in an unsafe or an unhealthy environment. They want clean air to breathe, and they want clean water to drink. So working conditions should meet basic requirements. There shouldn't be unsafe practices, and there shouldn't be the risk of harm to the workers. So the working conditions should enable the workers to function and feel that they are working in a safe environment. They're able to function without the worry of hurt or risk to their life or limb. Working hours. Well, workers may raise a dispute if they are working longer hours with little breaks. It depends on the types of occupation, but if people are doing hard manual work, the human body is not designed to just run forever doing this. The human body will wear out. It's like any machine almost. Machines wear out. So working agreed hours, and they should have rest periods to be able to relax and recover, and they shouldn't have to work every day of the week. They should have rest times. There's also the situation where people in offices have the same problem. If they're working hard in offices, dealing with data or dealing with documents, the human brain also needs a rest. The need to relax. So it's the same issue as the manual worker. If workers are made to work more than the agreed hours, then there is the potential for conflict. Sometimes companies expect workers to arrive early for work to show that they're enthusiastic, and to work late to show they're enthusiastic. It's almost blackmail. It's asking the workers to work longer than was agreed, and if the workers don't work it, it's interpreted as a lack of loyalty to the organisation. But their loyalty to the organisation is while they're actually in work. They should not necessarily have to appear and work longer than is contracted. After all, people have family commitments. They have a need to rest, or need for recreation. So there is the potential for conflict in those situations. Sometimes workers may feel that they are asked to work longer hours for less pay. Sometimes if they're just simply working longer hours, then of course when they average out the hourly rate, they are getting less. So their salaries or their wages have been cut by simply getting them to work longer hours. The potential for conflict is there. Organisational policies. Well, disputes can arise if changes to policy or employment contracts without employee consultation. If the management suddenly change the policy, employment policy of the organisation without consulting the employees, just impose it on the employees, there is the potential for conflict. The employees may see it as unfair. Changes to policy can include changes to the pension, to sick pay, to holiday entitlement, promotion and redundancy. And changing any of these without consultation can lead to conflict. So in this video we've looked at areas where conflict can arise within employee relations. It's important to note these and to be able to recognize the sources of conflict, and those will help us to understand why conflict takes place, why we have let's say strikes or disputes within companies, and we can normally trace them back to some of the points mentioned in this session. But that's all I'm going to deal with here, so I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.